All right, so what we got here is we have a 2001 Lexus ES300 with the 3-liter. Car came in, check engine light on, no drivability symptoms, head codes, P0174, System 2 Lean Bank 2. We also have a P0171, which is System 2 Lean Bank 1. So what we're looking for is right off the bat, seeing what RPM the engine was. So we're 2,700 RPM, so most likely we were cruising down the highway. Make sure we're at operating temperature. We're at 192 degrees, so we're at full operating temperature. So we're looking at our freeze frame data. On this car, we were adding 39% on bank 2 long term with a minus 3% on bank 2. You want to achieve your total fuel trim, so you minus the 3 from the 39, and that'll give you your total fuel trim. So if you look here on bank 1, we're at 32% long term and negative 4.5. Again, you would minus the 4.5 from the 32. That would give you your total fuel trim. If that was your bank 1 was a positive number short term, you would add the two numbers together instead of subtract. That gives you your total fuel trim. Generally on most cars, anything over 10% is a problem, 25% is a clear problem. What we're doing here, this car was doing 74 miles an hour with a calculated load of 41%. So what that tells me is most likely this is not a vacuum leak, this is a fuel density issue. So we're going to start this car up after we look at our fuel trims. This gives us an idea where we're going to head first. So what we're going to do, I'm going to back out. Now I could drive this car down the road, but wouldn't work good for camera action. So we're going to go display data. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into our engine data. And now with the car just sitting here idling, we're going to find our fuel trims. So here at idle, basically in a nutshell, our short-term fuel trim is 0.8, long-term for bank 2 is 0. And then on bank 1, we're at 0.0, and then we're 3.8 on the long-term bank 1. So in my experience, usually we don't need to check for a vacuum leak because at idle you have your highest manifold vacuum. So that being said, this most likely is not a vacuum leak because they would occur most at idle. So what I'm going to do, race the engine up a little bit, get us close to that 2,700 RPM. And you can see we're at 14%, we're trying to add fuel. So we're starved for fuel, 17% long-term, 15% long-term. And if you bring it back down. So on this car here, chances are it's not a vacuum leak. Common problems on these cars would be a dirty mass airflow sensor. Also, fuel pressure would also be a factor. But usually when you have a fuel pressure problem, you have a drivability, hesitation, something along those lines. And we're going to shut the car off. Now something else to check for are your intake ports from your mass airflow to your throttle body. What we're looking for is any cracks in the boots. And a crack in the boot will give you added air, unmetered air. All right, so what we're going to do, simple on this car, we're going to remove these Phillips head screws. Be careful with these screws. These screws like to be pretty tight, and the Phillips likes to strip out on them. So normally what happens on these, on the inside, there's two hot wires. Both wires get hot, they collect debris. And basically what happens is when they collect debris, it acts like an insulator, and that insulator is what causes us to have an incorrect reading of airflow going into the engine. Basically the one wire on 90% of your mass airflow sensors stays at a constant amperage and voltage supply, and then the other wire they monitor, and the difference from the other wire, the amount of change it has to make to maintain its value, is how they determine how much air is flowing into the engine. The more air that's flowing in, the more current you need. So what we're going to basically do is just take those two wires. Most manufacturers don't recommend cleaning them. I've had good luck with cleaning them, especially these Toyota sensors. So I'm going to take a little screwdriver and a pick and clean it, and we should be good. So 3 tools I predominantly use: straight pick, 45 pick, simple flat blade screwdriver, 1/8 inch tip. Want to be very gentle with these wires because you can easily break them.
You can't use compressed air to clean that?
You could. I generally do not. And I generally don't use any carb spray, 2+2, brake clean, anything along those lines, because the stuff can leak into the sensor and damage the sensor. So here we have a clean sensor. And you can tell me how much cleaner you see it. Put the magic stuff on the screws. Anti-seize compound. Snug them up. Now what we're going to do, start the car. So we're going to go to engine data. We're going to go back down to our fuel trims. Now we didn't clear the code yet or reset the adaptive learn. So what we should see is some negative numbers, and that's already what we're seeing. We're already seeing -3 on the short term on bank 2 and -1.5, and we're seeing -1 on the bank 2. So what we're going to do is we're going to rev this engine back up, and then we're going to see if those numbers are back negative, and that tells us we're removing fuel. Now, as you see right there, the car is adjusting. Our long-term fuel trim on bank 2 is 1.9. Short-term is it looks like 0 now. So then we're going to let off, and our numbers are going to be good. So what we're going to do is now we're going to clear these codes in this car, and then we'll take this out for a road test, which we're not going to film. And we're going to go to the 72 miles an hour that the customer is doing, 2,700 RPM. And we'll look at the fuel trims at that speed, because that's when the car captured the data in the freeze frame data. It's the marvel of the freeze frame data. You can basically duplicate when the car detected the problem, and you can test drive the car and determine how it is.